Everybody, thank you so much for coming to the Bentley Historical Library. We have many things to talk to you about tonight. You will meet all of us and talk a little bit more about archives related to the Episcopal Church in the area, and all the things that they connect to that you might be interested in researching. My name is Megan Courtney, and on behalf of the Bentley staff, I'd like to welcome you all here. At this point, though, I'd like to turn over a little bit of the speaking to the Right Reverend Dr. Bonnie A. Perry, Bishop of Michigan. And my note, yes?
Megan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bonnie Perry, I know many of you, but not all of you. I serve as the Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan, and I am delighted that our records are here at the Bentley, and that we've got this partnership, and that Jamal is our historiographer, our archivist, and thank you so much for your good work and your passion. I think particularly, friends, as we look into what our role has been in the midst of redlining and racial inequities, I really want to know. I want to know what our role was, the Episcopal Church's role was in that, whether they were sins of omission or commission, or maybe we were awesome. And maybe, as is mostly the case, maybe it was somewhere in the middle, and that we learn how to do it better. And we do that with clear eyes and some enthusiasm and perhaps some compassion all the way around. So, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was very kind. It's my honor to serve in this position. I appreciate the welcome. On behalf of the Diocese and the Bentley Historical Library, welcome. My name is Jamal Dillman-Hasso. I have feet in the ecclesiastical and academic worlds. As the Right Reverend Dr. Perry mentioned, I'm the historiographer and archivist of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan. Thank you. I'm an acolyte and lay minister at St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Lansing, where I live. At the same time, I'm a Ph.D. candidate here in history, specializing in economic and business history of the British Empire, and I am interested in public history. Megan Courtney, the Interim Associate Director for Public Engagement here, has already introduced herself. Also here and will be assisting is Michelle McClellan, who is the Johanna Meyer-Magoon Principal Archivist at the Bentley. They've both been extraordinarily helpful and patient with me, as well as sources of great support in helping organize this talk. I also owe thanks to several other Bentley staff, as well as the staff of the diocese, and of course, the Right Reverend Dr. Bonnie Perry. Her Grace is here, so please behave yourselves. We're going to be recording the talk itself with the camera directed to the center here, and we'll stop recording before the interactive section towards the end. The event today is going to have a few components, driven in part by the fact that this talk was explicitly designed to bring together members of the academic and ecclesiastical communities. I want to offer myself here as a sort of metonymy or a prism for how the archives of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan can be used to address multiple types of questions and ways of knowing. We're then going to talk some about the archive. Megan and Michelle are going to speak about how the collections came to the Bentley and how you can use them from here or in absentia. Next, we'll transition to a display of a few types of primary sources held here from the Episcopal archives and some adjacent archives in University of Michigan, and you'll have a chance to see them up close in the reading room. By the end of this talk, we'd love to have conveyed the following things. Firstly, the archives here can be used for various research purposes, including academic and personal, and to learn about the church and its history. We're also going to show you how some archival materials, although they do not seem to have anything to do with the church, can actually provide us with considerable insights into this area. Number two, The archives are open for free to the public, so we'll talk about some of the ways that you can physically access and use them. And number 3, facilitating good research projects is something that the Bentley staff and I are pretty good at, and we want to aid you in learning more about your research interests. How many of you have visited the diocesan archives at the Bentley before today? Oh, wow, okay. For the churchgoers amongst you, how many have seen the archives of your parish or mission church? Okay, that's good. Do we happen to have any parochial archivists here today?
The district committee from St. Andrews Ann Arbor is here today.
Beautiful, excellent. You know this building. Another, yes, sir.
And from St. Matthew's, St. Joseph.
Yes, that's right. We corresponded earlier, yes.
Hi.
Hello. That is amazing that we have so many parochially engaged people with us today. This talk, however, is partly aimed at those of you who haven't been exposed to archives before. I didn't know there was an archive, or I don't know how to use the archive, or I'm daunted by how to access the archive, or what the heck is a parish? This talk can hopefully answer those questions and plant a few ideas for what you can do with the archives of the diocese here. Let's start with the obvious. Church vocabulary is difficult. There's a reason why every clergy person has a big church dictionary on the shelf of their office. I'm going to run through a tiny bit of the necessary vocabulary here. A diocese is a geographical unit of church governance headed by a bishop.
I was afraid no one was going to clap.
Yes, no, we're happy to. So the diocese is it's the standard territorial division of Anglicanism. The structure of bishops overseeing dioceses is vital to the way Anglicanism works. The Diocese of Michigan used to encompass all of the territory of Michigan, including Wisconsin, and also including the occupied Toledo Strip. But it had a few separations, and now you can see it's primarily the southeast corner of the state of Michigan up to and including most of Lansing. Dioceses are divided into congregations called parishes and missions. Parishes have priests called rectors and elect lay people to governing boards called vestries. And missions have priests typically called vicars and elect lay people to governing boards called bishops' committees. For those familiar with the way this vocabulary works in the Church of England, these are slightly different definitions, so do be careful. If you're ever dealing with church vocabulary and you run into a word you don't recognize, episcopalchurch.org/glossary, very easy to find URL, has all of the definitions that I have ever needed in my work. It's amazing, it's free to use, it's very searchable. The archives of the Diocese of Michigan pertain to what the diocese holds related to its own history. It's actually relatively rare for a diocese to have its records held professionally by a library, so we're extremely lucky to have ours held here at the Bentley. The archives have all sorts of things. They have records of diocesan programming and internal communications, notes about specific events and incidents from the past 2 centuries, certain clergy records, scrapbooks, diocesan historiography, records of closed parishes, and much more. They have significant research potential not only for people interested in the church and its history or the Anglican Communion, but also for people interested in broader questions of the history of Southeast Michigan. Now, I could spend many, many hours, as those who know me know, talking about the history of Anglicanism. The history of Anglicanism, even of Anglicanism in Michigan, is a global history. The two mother churches of the Episcopal Church, the Church of England and the Scots Episcopal Kirk, each have their own histories stretching back over 1,000 years and are deeply enmeshed not only in Britain but also in Europe and the world. Anglicanism in Michigan is wrapped up not only in the politics of Anglicanism in the United States, but also events in what we now call the Anglican Church of Canada, which had a very direct role in creating the Diocese of Michigan that was not shared elsewhere. But this talk is not about the history of the Church of England. It's not about the English Reformation, or as the Scots say, the killing times. It's not about the non-juring crisis or the Hanoverian succession. It's not about church governance in Ireland or Jerusalem. It's about us. Anglicans and non-Anglicans, academics and non-academics, interested in narratives, inquiry, analysis, and positioning ourselves within the stories that have been transmitted to us so that we can alter and transmit them to those who come after. Whoops, skipped a slide. I took the diocesan historiographer and archivist role around a year ago when I casually mentioned to my rector, remember that's the incumbent priest of a parish, that I was interested in public history as a career. Without making any promises, she mentioned to me that the diocesan archives are stored at the Bentley and got me in touch with the tireless canon Joanne Hardy. Canon Hardy seemed, if I may say, a little bit baffled that someone was interested enough in public history to seek out volunteer work, but was also delighted that the diocesan stars were aligning as the two previous historiographers and archivists of the diocese were transitioning towards retirement after a venerable 9-year stint in the position. One of my first tasks was to clear out some boxes at the cathedral and transfer them here to the Bentley. The boxes consisted of the records from 4 parishes that had closed. Open parishes typically maintain their own records in-house, or at least canon law stipulates that they're supposed to. When they're closed, the diocese ensures that they are taken care of and moved to the Bentley. The first set of records that I prepared to bring to the Bentley were those belonging to the former St. Augustine parish in Mason. I live near there, so I was curious to see if any familiar names transferred to my parish once St. Augustine closed. They did, by the way. St. Augustine opened as a mission church in 1961, became a parish in 2003, and closed in 2022. I sorted their records, shredded what needed to be shredded, otherwise disposed of what canon law allowed, making a few executive decisions about potential research interest. Then I helped work with Michelle on an intake form to make it easy for them to accession the records, and I drove them over here. The next one I did was Christ the King Parish in Taylor. It opened as a mission in 1957, became a parish around 1960, and closed in 2022. Its last service was Easter Sunday that year. Then St. Elizabeth's, Redford. It opened as a mission in 1956, became a parish in 1975, and closed in 2022. You'll notice something about these dates and locations for the 3 parishes I mentioned. These are all churches that opened up as suburban or ex-urban missions in the post-war period as Detroit was sprawling and slowly being hollowed out. I can also give you some census records about the cities they were in. In 2010, the downriver city of Taylor, which was charted as a city under George Romney, was about 80% white. Redford was 65% white in 2010, and black residents were barred from home ownership there until the mid-1960s. Mason, effectively an exurb of Lansing, was 90% white, and Malcolm X's autobiography has some choice words for how he was treated there as a child. I am not saying this to make anyone feel out of place. These statistics do not paint entire communities or cities in any specific way. But as historians, and we are all historians here today, our job is to turn a sober eye to context and information so that we can empathize with the past and illuminate the present. We are always making decisions about how to understand information given to us. In Michigan, to some extent before, but especially after the Americans took over, race was and is a part of how society functioned and functions. I believe it would be negligent to ignore it, given the extent to which American society has been structured around the social construction of race. It's simply the world we inhabit. The epistemology of American history interacted cleanly with the parishes I was seeing. Long-standing Episcopalians, or those familiar with Detroit's racial history, will know the name of the fourth church I collected records for, St. Cyprian's Episcopal Church. However, I didn't know the name or the history. I was baptized in 2022 after my father died and after St. Cyprian's had already closed. My relationship with Anglicanism before then was more connected with events long before the 20th century. When I saw the boxes of St. Cyprian's, I just saw a massive amount of material to sort through, and it daunted me. I was probably handed 30 linear feet from them, which I managed to whittle down eventually to 10. But before starting, I just assumed that this was another one of those post-war churches that grew when whites moved to the suburbs and then overextended and collapsed. At first, I was mostly dealing with the same types of records I'd see at other parishes. The names I saw, I didn't recognize. I'm not a historian of Detroit. The first thing that surprised me about St. Cyprian's was that it was actually a bit older. Now, it wasn't what I would call old, which means it did not predate industrialization. You ask a historian, they'll tell you. But it did manage to mark a centenary before its tragic closure. It opened in 1919. The second thing that surprised me was that it became quickly clear that St. Cyprian's opened as a West Side Detroit mission of St. Matthew's, Detroit. Now, St. Matthew's was one of the oldest Protestant churches in Detroit. It originally formed as an Episcopal congregation in 1844 to minister specifically to Black Episcopalians, some of them having fled enslavement, others the families of returning Black loyalists, and the like. St. Matthew's went through a brief Baptist period around the time of the American Civil War, but it's still around and vibrant, having merged with another nearby Episcopal parish. That I did know beforehand. St. Matthew's is a famous church. But the question that went through my head when I was looking through St. Cyprian's records is, it makes sense why a group of people wanting to found an Episcopal mission would want the sponsorship of a parish nearby. But St. Cyprian's and St. Matthew's weren't especially close to each other. So why would a church seek out the patronage of Detroit's famous Black Episcopal Church? Things began to dawn on me, finally, when I saw a few photographs of vestry meetings that someone had kept in with the records. Canon law, that's church law, does tend to be relatively strict about what records are kept and what are destroyed. And vestry photos are definitely not in the keep category, but there is some latitude for the archivist's sense of potential research interest, what I think researchers in the future will want to see when they open up the archive of a specific parish. Provided something is not required to be destroyed, like some sensitive personal information, the archivist can make decisions about preserving things that don't, quote unquote, need to be preserved, driven by that sort of sense that's trying to be predictive about what future historians will want to see. That sense does not override the paper shredder for all the weekly bulletins that every parish thinks the diocesan archive wants to hold forevermore. No bitter words. But I saw something that really shook my understanding of what this church was and who it served. A note from 1936 when the congregation of St. Cyprian's was transitioning from mission to parish that devoted some length to the reason for its foundation. I'll have a close-up in just a second. In the 19th century, an Episcopal parish called St. James was founded in what's now the west side of Detroit. Around 1910, a demographic shift that sociologists call the Great Migration began, when large numbers of Black Americans from southern states began to move north, including to Detroit, for what seemed at the time like better opportunities and safety. This affected the region around St. James Parish as well. And Black Episcopalians began to worship there alongside white ones. The St. James vestry grew hostile to this state of affairs. However, for Black worshippers to have been banned from services entirely would have been completely alien to what canon law existed at the time. The rector opposed such a ban, and the diocese would have prevented it. So the vestry of St. James did a very slightly subtler move when they decided that Nellie Warren, a Black mother, could not use the St. James building for Sunday school. The vestry then banned all other Black children from access to the building for Sunday school after Ms. Warren. Now, the churchgoers amongst you have a sense of what that would mean. If a group were to be banned from a Sunday school arrangement in 2025, the implications would be limited because ecclesiastical goings-on are not as central to American social life as they were in 1917 and 1918. But it would still have profound social consequences even today. Barred children lose access to networks that they can sustain for the rest of their lives. They also lose access to the sense of fellowship that church can provide, although many of them don't know why yet. But the real target was the parents, who lost their access to childcare while they were in worship, lost their own social opportunities and networking potential, and lost the sense that they had any control over or even access to sacred space. But the consequences were multiplied, because not only were these families losing access to spiritual growth and nourishment, they were also losing access to whatever camaraderie they could easily build with white elites, many of whom used churches as ways to assess and connect with other members of the community. So the folks went to the diocese, and their complaint was listened to and ignored. From the position of the diocese, the church could either antagonize every white power player in Michigan, or they could shrug and say that the Sunday school was under the purview of the parish vestry. The black and sympathetic churchgoers then decided to take matters into their own hands, approaching St. Matthew's Parish in 1917 and requesting sponsorship to form a mission. This request was much more pleasing to the diocese, and St. Matthew's was able to expand their footprint. St. Cyprian's, the cross here, was chartered as a mission in 1919, becoming a parish in 1936. This original map, by the way, is here at the Bentley. It's not in the Episcopal Church collections. It's a transportation map from 1930. So here's a closer look. This is Warren Avenue. The intersection of Warren and, where is it? Here's Warren and Grand. You can see Tyerman, and then where did, let's see, it's hard to tell on this zoom. Well, also the reason I picked a map from 1930 is the construction of the 94 completely altered the structure of this neighborhood. But you can see how close these church buildings were to each other and how very much part of the same physically bounded community they could have been.
Can I point out something while you have the map up there?
Yes, of course, please.
Up there, there's a street called Stoughton there. That's where the A&E church was, St. Stephen's. One block over was St. Cyprian. One block over from Hartford was the Hartford Baptist Church. And one block over from that was the Tabernacle Baptist Church. In the small, defined community here, it was a segregated community that's the oasis that existed in the city of Detroit. But each one of those streets had an African-American church on it.
Yeah, I see. I actually didn't know that. Yeah, that's amazing. Would you say then that McGraw was sort of the like dividing line of the sort of...
There's ways that you call it the dividing line or you call it the barrier.
Right.
The barrier was in McGraw, and then the other one was Tyerman.
Right.
To the west side, it was more like Livernois for the most part. Most people lived in that sandwiched area right through there. My family lived down the street from St.
Could you share what she's saying?
Yeah.
Yes, of course. So, there's a lot of things going on here. So first of all, St. Cyprian's, which is the church that I've been discussing, was 1 block away from an AME church, and you said a...
St. Stephen's and Hartford Avenue Baptist Church.
Okay, Hartford Avenue Baptist Church.
And they all started right around the same time.
Right. And yes, and so they would all have been within the same 3 or 4 block radius. That's 4 black churches, right? Or 3? 4.
Well, actually, yeah, there were some other ones that came later. The Catholic Church, which was not an original black church, was just south of that, and they worshiped also there.
I see. Okay.
And on the end of Hartford and everything, that's where the Jeffersons would pick up the students and take them to St. Matthew's and bring them back home.
Oh, before I see.
That was a meeting spot there.
Okay, I see. So they would go. I'm going to go one.
Graduation of
St. Matthew's would have originally been around here-ish. I'm not actually, but yeah, that's amazing. And then St. James, the former parish, would have been below McGraw, which was sort of the dividing line or the barrier that segregated the demographics of that part of West Detroit. That's amazing information. Thank you, Doctor.
I got more stuff. I can tell you that.
I'm truly glad that you're here. St. Cyprian's, by virtue not only of its politics, but also of its parishioners' keen sense of their relationship to or against power, was highly involved not only in Christian work, but also civil rights, labor, housing, pacifist, schooling and busing, electoral, and many other types of work. They were also controversial. Their longtime rector, the Reverend Canon Malcolm Dade, was very charismatic and had a self-assurance of his own power. And his son, also named Malcolm, worked at Detroit Mayor Coleman Young's office for part of the 1970s and 1980s. St. Cyprian actually, so speaking of the sort of way that the neighborhood functioned, especially after the 94 was constructed, St. Cyprian's did very well, given the character of sort of the location of that area once the interstate was built, and the decline of Episcopal Church membership that accelerated beginning in the 1970s. St. Cyprian's was actually excellently managed in very hostile circumstances. They gave regular services through the turn of the millennium and were still operating when COVID hit. They closed in 2021. We have some records from them in the reading room once we get to the show and tell bit. When people reach out to me in my position as archivist, I'd estimate that 85% of the time, it's because they want a record of a specific rite in their or one of their immediate family members' past. There are all sorts of reasons to need these, and I actually enjoy looking for them. But as I was driving the St. Cyprian's records over to the Bentley, getting red rot into my car boot, it occurred to me that the stories held in this archive are so much richer than that. That the research questions people can ask around these archives extend far beyond personal records and deal with questions that address the character of Southeast Michigan society and even broader Michigan society for the past 2 centuries. For example, people interested in white settlement and the rise of residential schools in the 19th century can find in these archives detailed descriptions of relationships between SPG, that's the Church of England Missionary Society, SPG missionaries and local Ogimag, or Indian leaders, who used a building called the Indian Council House. Did I have a picture of that? Well, there's a picture of it in the reading room. It's now the Mariners Church. And they negotiated alliances and attempted to forestall American encroachment in the region. Once the Americans took over, the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan briefly operated a residential school, although the school transferred to Wisconsin when Michigan got statehood. It's in the Oneida Reservation near Green Bay, Wisconsin. And outside of the diocesan archives, you can see all sorts of relationships emerge in Bentley collections between Anglican and Indian officials that impacted the way indigeneity worked and works in Michigan to this day, and even Wisconsin. People interested in urban and architectural history can find dozens of planning records, mortgages, and leaseholds for churches in both larger and smaller cities, although some of the gorgeous historic churches like St. Andrew's here are open and they keep their own parochial records. I actually think that St. Andrew's has a lot of its records stored here, like specifically the parochial records here at the Bentley. Closed parish records here also have an enormous amount, ranging from details about quotidian life that can be gleaned from vestry minutes and building records and service records, to things like photographs and drawings. You can tell from those sorts of records the sorts of people to be of particular importance in their communities, both secular and ecclesiastical. Clergy records are all over this archive, but we do have special files devoted to some of the more involved bishops, such as the Right Reverend Richard Emmerich, who presided over the diocese during a period of massive social and political transformation, and who worked closely with Governor Soapy Williams, who, by the way, worshipped at my home parish whenever he was in Lansing. And then there are the things that have more narrow research applications, certain legal records, all sorts of ways in which 19th century theological disputes emerged and manifested in Michigan, etc. I do think that if you're approaching a research question through these archives, you should generally begin by knowing what scholars have already written about your topic of interest. Having a grasp of what historians call the secondary literature is instinct to academic historians, but often hard to find for those who don't have easy access to academic communities. If anyone has specific questions about what literature that can be used to help tackle a research question, please feel free to send me an email. Once you've done that, it comes time to actually approach the archive. With that, I am going to hand the talk over to Michelle and Megan, who are going to talk a little bit about how to use the archives here and how they came to the Bentley.
So I just want to second the welcome to the Bentley. My name is Michelle McClellan, and I am the field archivist for the Michigan Historical Collections. So that means I work with donors to help bring materials into the Bentley. I've worked with many of the people in this room. So it's great to see you and to just sort of feel this energy and enthusiasm. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about the Bentley overall. Can't resist doing that, giving you a sense of our scale and scope. And then I will talk specifically about how the Episcopal Diocese records came here to the Bentley. So, as you may know, we have two main collecting areas here at the Bentley. We are the institutional archive for the university itself, and we also collect in what's called the Michigan Historical Collections. That's the history of the state. So the church records come in under the MHC, as we call it, as part of the history of the state. So to just give you a little bit of a sense of the size and scope of our holdings, we measure analog material, physical material, and the unit is a linear foot. You know, a banker's box, that box on the shelf, that counts as 1 foot. The Bentley holds 75,000 linear feet of primary source material, 136 terabytes of digital material. Now that's a lot harder for me to conceptualize. I don't know exactly what that means, but I know it's a lot, okay? 10,000 maps, 80,000 printed volumes, 1.5 million photographs, 12,000 distinct collections. So 12,000 individuals or organizations or groups have decided to donate their materials to the Bentley. The Bentley, like every archives, has a dual mission. We preserve material and we make it available. Those are equally important. At times they can feel almost in tension, but they are equally important. Preserve to make available. Now churches, as you all know, make records, right? They tend to make a lot of records. And in my experience, churches are often very self-conscious about their own history. They're aware of history. They care about their legacy. They think about themselves sort of in the scope of time. That is music to my ears as a field archivist, right? Because there's material to work with. So how do materials come to the Bentley? We receive materials, we accept materials by donation. We do not purchase. This comes in by donation. Sometimes people reach out to us. Sometimes we are reaching out to individuals or groups. So that's part of my job description as the field archivist, is to really try to have a sense of what is happening in Michigan, what might prove to be important into the future, and to reach out to individuals or groups and say, hey, we believe that your story is an important part of Michigan history. Have you ever thought about donating to the Bentley? So it's a pretty fun job, I have to say. I feel very fortunate to be able to do this. So in terms of church records in general at the Bentley, this has been a priority of collecting for the Bentley for a long time. And the Bentley holds a wealth of material related to churches, including individual congregations and larger bodies. And as you know, different denominations have different structures, different denominations have different rules about how their records are to be preserved. We are also working very hard today to broaden our holdings to include a wider variety of faith traditions. Now, the Bentley also holds the records of the Western Diocese of Michigan. Tonight, of course, our focus is on the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan, and I really appreciated Jamal's kind of explanation there, because I'm still learning some of this, and it is complex. So one thing to think about is that the organizing unit in any archive is the collection. And the collection follows from kind of the origin or the creator of those records. So we try to replicate in here kind of what your structure is out there, so that there's a logic that people can understand in terms of how those records are created and come into the Bentley. That means here at the Bentley, the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan is the donor in our parlance. And I'm mentioning that because if you're starting to do research, many churches, particularly closed churches, those records are considered for us to be part of that larger umbrella of the diocese. So this probably won't matter, but I think it is a useful piece of information, because that's how we're thinking of it, and it may be that using that term of the diocese might help you find something if you're having a little bit of trouble. And Jamal mentioned this intake form that we worked on together, and I'm hugely appreciative of that, because that was really an attempt to get at the front end the information about, did this church move its physical location? Did it change names? Did it merge with another church? That's really important in tracking this stuff backward. So the collection today of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan here at the Bentley is 70 linear feet, 5 oversized folders, 14 oversized volumes. So we're very specific in how we try to describe this. And that does not count the recent additions that Jamal described, and one additional one that came in during COVID. So those have not yet been incorporated into the collection and made available. Okay, so that's some framing. How did these specific records get here? So the Michigan Historical Collections was established in 1935. That's sort of the precursor to the Bentley. Before this building existed, before this name existed, the Michigan Historical Collections was kind of the beginning part. And in 1939, only 4 years later, Louis Vandervelde, professor of history and director of the Michigan Historical Collections, reached out to Bishop Herman Page of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan and said, "I'm writing to invite your cooperation in making inactive church records accessible to interested scholars of church and social history," 1939. And I think right there we see an awareness more than 80 years ago of the potential for scholarly interest in church records for social history, for a wider social and intellectual history, just as Jamal was telling us about earlier. So Vandervelde went to the diocese level rather than to individual churches because he wanted to get approval and make this, all kind of straightforward for everybody to understand. The diocese responded, "Well, we'll think about it." Fair response, okay? Later in 1939, the Vandervelde again contacted the diocese to propose a meeting, and this was a more ecumenical meeting. He was clearly talking to other denominations too, and a number of individuals who were responsible for church records said, we should get together. Let's kind of get together and talk about this. So the diocese sent a representative to a meeting that included Presbyterian, Congregational, and Baptist denominations. Again, this kind of broader conversation. What are we going to do with these materials? What's the best thing to do with them? The diocese itself had been trying to consolidate historical materials and initially wanted everything at the office in Detroit. This is still an issue of there are advantages to giving to an archive, there are advantages to keeping them close to home. So they're kind of still thinking about that. In the meanwhile, the Michigan Historical Collections began collecting convention journals and the Michigan Churchman paper. Finally, then in 1960, the diocese established a collection and signed the agreement of deposit on June 16, 1960. And Bishop Richard Emmerich, whose name we've already heard, he was the signatory. He was the one, the original depositor. And at that time, it was written on the deposit agreement that note-taking would only be allowed with pencil or with a typewriter. So that gives us a little bit of a snapshot of that time, right? So I want to emphasize that this is an ongoing partnership. For us, individuals from the diocese serve as subject matter experts. They know the landscape, and they often serve sometimes as ambassadors for the Bentley to others. So 2 quick examples. In 1984, the diocese brought to the Bentley's attention that the Michigan Council of Churches was potentially interested in creating a collection. As is often the case in driving these kinds of decisions, the Michigan Council of Churches was moving to another building. What do we do with all this stuff? And the diocese connected them with the Bentley. That collection came to the Bentley. It's now called the Michigan Ecumenical Forum. It includes material from early 20th century Sunday school to protests about the Vietnam War. So again, these are rich, rich collections that can tell us so many things. In the late 1980s, there was an effort by the Bentley to preserve Black church records, particularly in Detroit. Bentley archivists reached out to the diocese, and the diocese helped facilitate some connections there. That was a very important, very successful project. So we are pleased to be stewards of the records of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan, and very excited, as I said, to have this event to encourage their use, to feel your enthusiasm and energy. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Megan, who will explain more about how to actually do research here at the Bentley. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michelle. As mentioned, I'm Megan Courtney. One of the ways that we use this space quite a bit is with classes. So a lot of people are learning to use archives for the first time, and I have to say, some of the things we'll show you in a few minutes in the reading room are ones that we use with classes, people just getting started thinking about archives and how they connect to the world around you, how we got to this point with these historical clues from the past. But I'm going to give you all a little bit of the background information on how you might start looking these things up yourself. And then there will be plenty of time for looking and for questions. All right, so how can you use the Bentley? The first thing is you found it. You're here. You saw this on the way in. Great start, doing very well. As Michelle mentioned, we have some specialties, and she generally mentioned the university and the state of Michigan. But I think it's worth noting this is a slide I've shown to other people before, and we always list that things about life in the state of Michigan, our strengths are really the areas that people come to us specifically to research, and instead of going other places in the state, include faith communities. Alongside things like politics and politicians, a number of the governors of the state of Michigan have their materials here, and people can research how policy was made under those governors. Things like ecology and environmentalism, business, but then also the university's teaching, research, campus life, etc. And the thing is that all these things are sort of connected in a way, and depending on people's research questions, they certainly can use material across all of these different specialties. This is a campus map. Just like, looks good, yeah. As Michelle also mentioned, the things are organized by origin rather than topic. So if you wanted to look up things about the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan, there will be many collections in which that appears. There's going to be a lot of different viewpoints on the diocese. So it's not just the things that were created and gathered by the diocese itself, but it's things that reference. You may have sent a letter to someone else, and you can see the conversation happening between collections that represent different viewpoints. The reason we do it this way really is that it gives you all the clues we can possibly preserve to help you kind of hear from the past directly. You can see these materials in their context. If a meeting was held and 4 pieces of paper were referenced at that meeting, they're stored in the same folder together. You can see it the way that someone who attended the meeting would have seen it. So that's the reason that we try to preserve all these clues, but it can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge to research that way, because it's different from the way that you would Google things. So keep this in mind. This is sort of an important underpinning of the way that you would search in these kind of collections. This is what it looks like in the back. just so you know, this is part of, you'll see some of the things that look like these ledgers and stuff when we get out there. But one of the things that we also like to point out to people is that these things are originals. They are nowhere else in the world. When they're here in our stacks and we're caring for them in the reading room, the reason that we ask people to, do things like sign in and take extra care to keep your hands clean, etc., is because we cannot replace any of this stuff. So that's part of our partnership with donors, is to make sure that the material is stewarded as best we can. So we will ask you when you're looking out here to be gentle. Ask before, moving things around. Some of the things you can, turn the pages, but we'll talk about it as we go along. Worth noting possibly that almost 40 people work here. A lot of people work here. We're not all here now because it's the evening. But I point this out because it takes a lot of work to keep these things safe and keep them available for people. One thing I'll show you here, some of our various experts around the building. Corinne is our conservator. This is the lab that she works in. She does repairs to things so that people can continue to use them. Some of the things you will have seen, Jamal showed a map, and I think maps are one of the common things that go through conservation because people touch them and they need extra support. We also have people that specialize in working with digital materials, so some of our stuff that you'll be able to access is, this is a digitized film, and you can see that from your house. So a lot of people working here doing a lot of different kinds of work to make it so you can see it. This is a close-up of one of the things that Corinne worked on. It's a glass plate negative, so the photograph itself was taken, like the image is on the glass, and it's got a crack in it here, a crack here, so she repaired that, but also this is something that you can get to digitally now. Because obviously it's a little risky to handle glass, move it around, so we try to limit how much it gets handled. Although, you can still see some of these. Researchers come to us, perhaps worth knowing, from around the world. In our reading room, which you'll see in a moment, about 2/3 of our visitors are not related to the university at all. They're people who are doing things like researching these sort of bigger questions. They might use university collections, but they're not people who are simply students or faculty, although we work with those groups as well. This is a class doing some work with material here in this very room. Okay, so how can you join these people? You don't have to jog here at 5:30 in the morning like they made the swim team group do. You can come during our normal reading room hours. Worth noting that right now, at least, We are open for researchers in our reading room weekdays between 10 and 4. I will say we are looking at adjusting those hours to be a little bit more friendly to a day job kind of schedule. So keep your eyes open for that as it evolves over the next several months. There are a couple of different ways. In person is the fastest way in most situations. If you were doing this, you would search in the descriptions and consult with archivists, and then we would prepare the material you have selected in advance for you to see in the reading room. I'll tell you how to do that in just a moment. There are a number of things you can also find online, and I'll show you a couple of the ways you might do that as well. But I will say that this is true in most archives. A teeny tiny percentage of what is available to you is available online. That will probably always be the case. We are not attempting to digitize everything, so the originals are in most cases what we have for you. Now, there are always exceptions to this, so I have a couple of other things to mention about how you can get to some of that stuff remotely if you're not able to make it in person. Let me show you how this works. So one thing that you'll need to do, whether you're looking at things in person or looking at them online, is to make an account. It is, I know, make another account, but it's the way that it works. It is free. It's just so that we will be able to see what you all want to see. The place that most people get started is bentley.umich.edu. This is our website. We're also updating this, so keep yourself ready for that. You can begin search here, but I will say that the options over here are other interesting ways in to the record. So finding aids are tools that we use in archives to describe a collection. We mentioned the collection as sort of this organizing principle. I like to start with the finding aids search unless I know that I want something that's like a newsletter or a serial, that kind of thing. So I'm actually going to skip over to finding aids. All right. Let's try it out. Somebody toss me an idea of something you'd like to research.
Resolutions adopted at the 2001 Diocesan Convention of the Episcopal Diocese of Michigan.
This is very specific. Okay.
It's what brought me here before.
Do you know that that exists?
I do know that it exists. I've brought it up. It would be in the Journal of the Diocese of Michigan.
Okay,
of
so
the convention.
that is 2002.
2001.
2001.
Yeah, but the resolutions would be in the 2000.
So
Yes, that's true. Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. Yes. Yes.
So, okay, because it's in a journal, which is sort of like an annual publication, I would actually probably use this, which searches the catalog. So, okay, so what would the document be called? The journal,
I don't remember exactly the title of it, but
Diocese of Michigan Journal.
yeah, try that.
okay, I'm spelled the diocese wrong.
DIOC.
It's hard.
Wait, tell me, okay, D-I-O.
D-O-C-E-S.
I spelled, I got Michigan wrong, so.
Also hard. Yep.
It's definitely the keyboard's fault. Let's see what we get here. So if we know, okay, so yes, if we know,
Yes.
Look at that.
so this is the catalog record, and you can see this, many of 22 of these items on HathiTrust. So these are going to be the older ones, most likely.
Look at that.
You can open the full text, but it looks like, let's see all 22. It only goes up to 1929. This is probably, there's a reason for that. I expect they'll probably continue. If you want to see the ones after 1929, Bentley Historical is 121 items, so that goes further. Let's see, we can figure out, if we wanted to go all the way, I promise there is a 2000, it's some scrolling, but we'll get there. So this is something that you can request for use in the reading room. If you hit request this, it's going to ask you to log into your account. And then you have started the process of linking things together on the back end so that we know what you want to see. So you could request this, you could see it. If you wanted to think about what else the diocese is up to in 2001, 2002, let's see what happens. Okay, good. Someone has already searched that, and I won't have to spell it again. Let's see what happens. So in this case, I have found, this gray box is showing me the finding aid. So the finding aid is going to describe that whole collection together as a unit, because we understand it as this sort of functional piece together. The context is the collection that it lives in. So we can see that this phrase is coming up 991 times because it's the title of the collection. Of course it is. But if I open this, it's going to tell me more about what the collection means as a unit. It's going to give you a little bit of info about the fact that there are bishops' files, records of executive and administrative bodies. It's going to tell you that there's this much stuff in it. And you can expand all of these things. Bishop's files. Let's say you wanted to know more about Bishop Richard Emmerich's files. Okay, so I want to know about the Citizens Committee on Group Tensions from 1953. That sounds pretty interesting.
Same as it ever was.
So if I wanted to look at this in the reading room, I would hit this box, and you'll see that it will let you request it up at the top. So if you do request it, I think if I do this, it might attempt to send this to, if you're logged in, it might.
I don't know if it's in my Eon right now.
Okay.
We'll see.
Let's see what happens. You can request more boxes from this collection if you want to. Okay, so at this point it will make you log in. And I will tell you that it will also open up a page that allows you to request things for duplication. You will do that at the same time. So you can request it for use in the reading room, or you can request it for duplication. The trick about duplication is that it takes a while. So expect that it's going to be 10-ish weeks before the things would be available to you. Sometimes fewer. It depends on the time of year. So it is often faster to come in person. And the great thing about doing that is that you can see the other things in the box, which are often related. I don't know if any of you remember going to a physical library and sort of browsing. Like if you go to sociology, then you see like books about sociology you didn't even know you wanted, but it turns out you did want. It works the same way with archival records. Some of those adjacent folders might not have called out to you from the finding aid, but in fact they really do illuminate the questions that you are asking in the past. But the interesting thing about this that I want to point out is that these results, you can see it's small here, but it says that this collection is at the Bentley Historical Library. This tool will search across all the different repositories that have their stuff in here. So you can also find the things that appear at the Clements. And that will be marked. You can see which spot it comes from. This also brings you things from Central Michigan University, from the special collections here at U of M, and a couple of collections from the state archives. So you can kind of get a broader view from searching here as well. But make sure you know which is which, because if you're visiting in person, you will have to go to that place in person.
But I'm presuming that items from other, like the Clements or Central Michigan, would not come here. They stay in their original.
Yeah, they don't travel.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank you. That's the word I was looking for.
You would have to go to them. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Although the one exception to that sometimes is, at least for us, microfilm. You can sometimes have it lent to a library where a microfilm reader
Do
exists.
you have the publication, the Episcopal Record?
Let's find out.
You should.
This is a lot of pressure. Okay.
Typing is hard with people watching.
It is. Yeah. Okay. Is this the one that we mean? The
Yep.
Put Bentley Library in there too. It just shows up as a topic.
within this?
Yes, within that.
I mean, not that we've tagged, but that doesn't mean that it isn't. So online resources, that's interesting. Okay, 2004 to 2009. So when this is happening, there are like different ways to access it. It looks like, in this case, you can request it. You would have to indicate what year you want, because we probably won't get them all out. Well, we will eventually, but not all at the same time. So you can certainly look at this.
Try Brian Williams.
Not yet, not yet. Then the other thing we might have is web archives. So in some ways you can find archived websites of some of the things that that we have got here. It looks like we started capturing this in 2011. So if you wanted to see what the Episcopal Diocese website looked like, newspaper website looked like in this moment, you could do that. Let's see, I'm going to go back to this page and show you the image bank is a place where we've brought together many of the different photographs that we have digitized from across collections. Brian, can you think of any that would be relevant to this group that are in the image bank?
Not offhand.
Okay, yeah, that was not a fair question. Brian mostly works with university records, but he's worked here a long time.
I mean, I got a lot of my images for my presentation from the image bank.
Yeah.
I'm searching St. Matthew's.
Okay. Well, that's, okay, I think it's searching separately. So one trick about, well, would put it in quotation marks so it searches the whole string together. No,
Apostrophe S?
The fun tricks we'll have to employ. I know it exists in here.
Capitalize the M.
You know what, I'm just gonna go with Episcopal. Let's see what we get. All right,
There he is. There he is.
there he is, this old guy.
Samuel Allen. Look at him. There's Samuel.
So it looks like it's a drawing. So any place where we have brought things together, oh, here's an exterior. Okay, so one trick about this is that you can open up this image, and I always encourage you, if you're finding archival stuff online, to look for the description, because once it loads itself, we'll see it, but it tells you where this came, like what collection this came from. So you can discover that at the Bentley there is a St. Matthew's and St. Joseph's Episcopal Church, Detroit, Michigan records collection, which has way, way, way more stuff in it. So then you can request that collection and see the rest of what's there. I don't know why this isn't showing us, but I promise it's real. I think we may have, there we go. There we go. So you can see the images, you can zoom in on the images, you can download the images, but this is really, really useful for you to know that there is more, there's way more. Box 13 means that there are at least 12 other boxes that we've got.
See that picture one more time?
Yeah.
If you look at that picture, that's the exact site of what Ford Field is right now.
Oh,
Oh, wow.
we may not know. One of the other things in archives is that we only tell you the things we do know, so we will not do a lot of speculating. The collection description is going to tell you what we know, and oftentimes you bring some context to the table yourself. So as Jamal mentioned, sometimes you do some research with other secondary work as well first. Does anyone have questions about how you would actually find this material before we kind of switch to the next phase? Yes?
If I ask for a copy of something, is it possible to get that digitized, so I wouldn't have to come into the collection?
Yes, so if you found something, for example, in the image bank, you could download it straight from there, but if you needed to have some access to something that is not yet digitized, then what you would do is, let's say you wanted to have one of these things, the bishop's files. Let's say you want to get this folder that's called background. Once you click this and then hit request, it's going to bring you to this login page. And when you log in as yourself, it'll give you an option to request for duplication. And we can actually, if you have something you'd like to set up, we can set up an account when we are in the room there. So once you request it for duplication, you'll get an email back from us that sort of clarifies some of the finer points. They'll ask you things like, what resolution do you need? And we'll figure that out. We can talk about it if you need to discuss. And then our digitization lab will work on scanning it. And so ultimately, after several weeks, you would get a file via Dropbox. Yeah, so they'll send it to you electronically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yes?
Who owns copyright to the materials?
Michelle, do you have a comment on that?
What was the question?
Well, who owns copyright on this material?
The Episcopal Church?
It depends. It depends on who the collection creator is the short answer. We do try to offer some information about that in the finding aid. So the scope and content is going to tell you essentially what's in here and what the group is up to. But if you continue to scroll down past this additional context information, it will usually, it's going to tell you where it came from. So this group is on deposit from the Diocese of Michigan, which usually if it's on deposit means that the copyright is retained by the donor. Is that, yep. Sometimes you will find collections where it says that the copyright has been transferred to the regents of the University of Michigan, in which case, we say to people, use this for educational purposes in the ways that you will. And there's information here about that. We don't have a lot of material that's on deposit anymore, but when it is, it's still technically owned by the collection creator. We are sort of stewarding it. Yeah. Okay. Do you have just a few more statements there, Jamal? Oh, sorry.
I just wanted to iterate that, I've done a lot of archive work, and the British Empire is famously pretty big. And also, they loved paper. And so I've done a lot of work at archives where I've gone in person, and I've also had to do a lot of work in digitized archives.
I am really grateful to the people who have done and continue to do digitization of their archival materials. It is not at all the same research experience as being able to access, to see these boxes. Like the library analogy, I think, is really good because you're seeing things that you didn't even know were relevant to you, and that can take you down directions that you might be surprised by. Whereas if you know what you want, you type in what you want into a search bar and you get a PDF of what you want, that's great, it's useful, it's really hard work, and I'm really grateful to the people who do it, but it doesn't really have as much of that possibility for you to follow your own intuitions and your own interests as a researcher. That was the main thing that I wanted to iterate.
Okay. I think,
I love that.
yeah, it is, we call it discovery when people find things in the collections, but it is discovery in kind of a more, philosophical sense as well. And, while we are adding, I want to mention that, churches in particular are one of those spaces that I always tell people who are researching a geographical place to consider. We mentioned that the roads have changed, right? The names of streets have changed. Sometimes, highways have cut through. Other times they've changed them for other reasons. But I often ask people when they're researching a neighborhood, do you know any churches that were nearby? Do you know the name of a church, of a school, that kind of thing? That can be sort of an anchor for a place. And so thinking about it that way and like the life of a neighborhood, the life of a city, there are so many connections that you might make, and we can explore in a few.
Yeah.
Okay, time to transition?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, now is the time when we'll get a little bit more hands-on. If you want to touch things, there are some of the things that you can touch. Please do make sure your hands are clean, and there are restrooms out in the hall if you need to wash your hands. You can also look without touching if you choose not to wash your hands. And we'll also be around, Michelle and I, and my colleague Sarah is around as well. We can all talk to you about the materials that are there and help contextualize. Yes?
Before we do that, I just wanted to sing your praise. What you guys do here is just out of this world. It's fabulous. And I asked you to pull up the record because that's what got me here. There was a record, and on the cover of it is Brian Williams.
There he is.
From here. And we had a picture of the Sunday schools class from 1922 in that book. And I said, I gotta go see that. They brought me in here to do that.
Nice.
I mean, that's the impact of what you're doing has on all of our communities here, because it tells a story of how we got through this world. The second thing that happened, which I have to sing praise to, it's in the red book, I think. You got the red binder there?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
I was visiting my great-grandfather's cousin once, and she passed on to me this parchment. And I said, grandmother give you something, right? And so I took it and I read it. I couldn't believe it. And so I brought it.
The first page.
That's it.
Yeah.
You can't see it too well, but there's a parchment there. There's a date on there, 1794 or something like that. And this is our family's original papers of freedom, emancipation, that was passed down from generation to generation. That's not it, because the library told me, don't touch it. Don't forget it in the back room. But they took it and kept it for, about 10 weeks, and they did subtle repairs to it and taped pieces to it and laid it out and put it in a format that I could look at that. They took a photocopy of it, and that's when they said, don't put it in the sunlight. But that has such richness in this. And I'm saying this because this is what they do with our lives, what they can do. And I appreciate it so much, what is taking place here at this building, and the people. It's the people who go an extra step to make these things happen. Because that's living history, living American history that's through here. Thank you again for doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for saying so. Okay, let's go look at it. Yeah.